Hello and welcome to SHRP Talk, the show by washed up athletes for washed up athletes looking to be their best self. On today's episode, the brothers and I were joined by Korey Van Wyk. Korey is an expert in all things related to exercise science and nutrition. He has a diverse background as a coach, professor, researcher, speaker, and many other things. We dive into his personal journey, navigating these different careers, his own athletic background, and his training since he's been done as an athlete. We also dive into some different nutrition and supplement guidance and also discuss the art and the science of coaching and nutrition and trying to find that balance. It was a great episode, a great conversation, and I'm sure you'll learn many things from his personal journey as well as some many different areas where he is an expert in. So thanks for tuning in, and hopefully you enjoy. Before we get rolling with today's episode, I want to take a second to tell you about SHRP Training. Snyder Health Recovery and Performance Training is an online training platform to help washed up athletes look, feel, and move better. We offer several different group options catered to your needs, interests, and goals with new programs delivered each month through the Team Builder app. Features include video demonstrations, 24/7 messaging and feedback, and access to the Sharp Edge, a comprehensive guide to upgrade your diet, sleep, and life. Use the code PODCAST in all caps to get 50% off your first month when checking out a program. Iron sharpens iron, so let us help you become your sharpest self. Now let's go. And we're back with another edition of SHRP Talk. This week we have the pleasure of being joined by a former coach and professor of mine, master of all things exercise science, nutrition, supplements, DC Marvel Universe, and I'm sure many, many other things. Coach Van Wyk. It feels weird to call you anything other than Coach. Coach Van Wyk, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, actually, I feel weird when people call me coach because I haven't been, in theory, I technically haven't been one for over 4 years now, which is crazy. But even when I go to like work out and then I see old Northwestern people, they're like, "Hey, coach," and I'm just like, "Me? Oh, okay." So, but thank you guys. It's a pleasure to be on. I'm very excited for this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Maybe just want to kick it off by going a little bit into your own background. You can be as detailed or brief as you want. Maybe just where you're from, what you've done career-wise, athletic-wise, and kind of what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm basically a lifetime Iowan, much like yourselves. I grew up around the Pella, Iowa area. Like you guys, you just say the biggest near-ish, big-ish town. I actually grew up just outside of Linville, Iowa. If people have ever heard of Linville Sully High School, that was where probably the closest. But most people, I just say Pella because I went to Pella Christian High, went to Central College for my college education. So, I'm from that area, consider it home. I mean, like most people, very involved in high school, football, track, baseball, soccer first 2 years, but I was actually, had the opportunity to be on my school's first ever football team, which was a unique experience. And that's actually honestly what kicked off the whole strength and conditioning career path, to be honest with you. So, in college, I did play football. I actually joked I was a two-sport athlete because I also played rugby, although the rugby was definitely more of like a, club thing. It wasn't super serious, but, got exercise science degree in college, was super lucky in my education because Central College was probably, I don't know, it was one of the first, maybe like the second behind Springfield College to get a full-time strength and conditioning coach at a D3 level, 100% dedicated. Like he did not start teaching. He was only there to serve athletes. And actually before I got there, my mentor, they had a guy before him. So this would have been in like 2002 that Central had a full-time strength coach, which was crazy, but
Crazy.
So my mentor, he was an Iowa guy. So he was at Iowa in the true glory years, I would say, of 02 to 04. So he came in and it was like, there's a ton of excitement around him. And, he took it super seriously. He did not, think about, oh, I'm just going to use this as a stepping stone. He treated it exactly like he would any major program. And being the blue collar kind of culture that Central has, they just ate it up, and it was a perfect fit. So, he started an internship program right away when he got there. And when he told me that I could go through that internship program and work with him on the floor with athletes, I was like, okay, this is where I'm going. So I went to Central, and he had that internship program. I got to do that for 3 full years alongside my actual degree. So just a wonderful supplement in addition to coaching time on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Like from the get-go. I'll never forget when our very first meeting before I started interning, he's like, you'll observe for the first semester, just like get the lay of things. Yeah, Brandon's already like, yeah, I know that. It was one of the first sessions, and it was wrestling, and it was just me and him with 35 wrestlers, and he had it set up where on every major lift, the coach watched the final set. And it was like the first lift. I think it was the hang power clean or something. He has this huge stack of cards in his hands, getting ready. Like people are just sitting there waiting. He takes some of the stack, hands them to me, goes, "Here, take these." I don't know what just figure it out. From there on, it was like, all right, you show up, you may. I mean, there were times where he would just literally 30 seconds before the session started, he'd be like, "Hey, you're warming them up today." And like, do I know the band warm up? Do I know the stick warm up? Do I know the dynamic warm up? Like drills, that kind of stuff. So, but essential to getting you off on the right start, right? Like getting you in there, and then because by the time you leave, you're basically comfortable on the floor. And you're comfortable leading a group of 30 athletes, which is pretty unique. So. That was awesome. So his name was Jake Anderson, by the way. He's now the head strength coach at University of Wisconsin River Falls. And he's been there this is his first year. He actually was in Turkey for 10 years after he left Central as a strength and conditioning coach as well. So pretty unique. After that, I decided to get my master's degree in nutrition. Went to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln for that. Again, I feel like I stepped into a very unique situation because Nebraska, for all their faults, they've always been ahead of the curve when it comes to human performance. Going back to obviously to Boyd, but on the nutrition front, they were the only school that I could find in the entire country that had more than one full-time dietitian on staff. So they had 2 full-time dietitians. The head dietitian, his name was Josh Hingst, was also an SNC guy. So like he did his master's at Florida State, and he was a GA on their strength staff, but he was the dietitian. So like we hit it off right away, right away hit it off, and we've been in good contact ever since. But just getting that experience, since being a grad student, they gave me a little more responsibility. So in addition to obviously just stocking shakes and then making shakes for players who did not drink them. So yeah, it's so funny because, as all of us are somewhat familiar, you guys are obviously very familiar with the Iowa football program. So I go in, I'm an Iowa fan growing up, right? I'm going to Nebraska, and I'm working with athletes every day, putting on Husker stuff, and I'm like, am I going to become Husker? And all the circles like Taylor Martinez not drinking the protein shakes I made him. Oh, screw this.
Yeah,
you guys suck. Like I'm not. I'm so right now because I kid you not. I would make shakes, and we had 3 lists of every football player: weight gain people, maintenance people, body count people, and every single one had their own formula based on what they needed. And the Nebraska setup was like their football weight room. The nutrition station is literally outside the door, 20 feet away. And I would make all these shakes while they're lifting. And I kid you not, I'd throw half of them away after the lift because they wouldn't come take it. As a D3 athlete, that was so maddening. But that also highlighted the behavior change aspect of things, which was like, at the time I didn't understand that just because it's there doesn't mean people are going to do it.
Sure.
So that kind of goes into my career after this. But so I finished my degree, didn't know what the heck I was going to do. I was literally like getting to the end of my master's and thinking, now what? Like I didn't really realize at the time that because I did not become a dietitian, it didn't really allow me to do any more on a nutrition practice front than when I came in. I had the knowledge, but I didn't have the license. So I couldn't go and be a Josh Hanks with a D1 program. And what I would have had to do is stay at Nebraska for another 1 to 2 years to finish the coursework and internship to become a dietitian. Well, my soon-to-be fiance was like, "Are we getting married or what?" We are. That was kind of the worry thing that was going on. It's like, do I stay in Lincoln, make my future fiance move for 2 years? She's got to get a new teaching license because she's an elementary school teacher. She didn't want to do that. So I'm like, all right, well, I don't know if I want to go back into strength and conditioning because I like nutrition. At the time, I was a teaching assistant also for the nutrition department, and I had done some guest lecturing, and I really, really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the education side of things. I was a TA, so I was like, all right, let's do this PhD thing. So I like, where do you go in Iowa if you get a PhD in nutrition? You have one option: Iowa State. I just hit all the competitive, like all the rival Iowa like. So I started my PhD at Iowa State in nutrition science. I was going to get it in a lab that looked at basically exercise and muscle and nutrition interventions. One of the main things they looked at was HMB and vitamin D and effects on muscle, particularly in the elderly, but also in, healthy younger individuals. It got to the end of my first semester. He's like, I don't have any funding for you. I'm sorry. Like, I thought we were going to get a project, but if you work for me, you'll have to be a volunteer. I'm like, I can't do that. I'm getting married. Like, we're going to move to Des Moines. Like, I cannot work for free. So I went to work in another lab who had a project for me. And, it was a cool project. It was funded through the Egg Nutrition Center, and it was going to look at the effect of egg consumption on the type 2 diabetic condition. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, that actually has an impact on what we eat, right? Which is pretty rare, honestly, in some nutrition departments. They like look at a single pathway their entire life, and that's it. And that's actually what the professor I worked for did. He looked at methyl group metabolism. So all he knew was about folate and some of the B vitamins and choline. Like, that was his life. But that's actually translated to, okay, if you eat eggs and eat a lot of them, not only will you become diabetic, if you are diabetic, will it make you worse? And I'm like, okay, I can work with this. And there were like other things going on with this too, because a big component of methylation is epigenetics. So if you're unfamiliar with this, methyl group is a carbon with 3 hydrogens around it. If a methyl group gets tagged onto a gene in your DNA, it shuts the gene off. That's an epigenetic control. It's on your DNA. And we were going to look at if egg consumption impacted epigenetic expression of genes involved in blood sugar management. And epigenetics was huge at the time. And I'm like, okay, if I do this, I'll be an expert in epigenetics. Okay, well, this is also a co-run with a vitamin D lab. So we're also going to look at what happened with vitamin D. So I'm like looking at this, I'm like, okay, I can make this work. Like, it's all in rats and animal model. It's in like a disease population, but when I get it out, I can make this work for me. And then one day I was asked to do like molar conversions and calculations in the lab. And I was like, I literally have not had this since freshman year of college, Gen Chem. And then I didn't really realize I was basically going to be asked to be a biochemist. I was so out of my depth. It was crazy. And so like, I went from strength conditioning, sports nutrition, literally in a lab all the day. Some of that day was always spent with my rats. Like, you go down to where they keep your rats for your study, you weigh the rats. And since we were saying had diabetes, they're all diabetic. They all become diabetic throughout the course of the study. And like, one of the symptoms of becoming diabetic is you pee a lot. right? And so these rats were like peeing all over themselves. I gotta weigh them. They hate me. Like, one of the funny things about when you do like research is you get a feel for like when you read the methods for what is actually happening here. So even just a very simple thing like weighing a rat, how much does it weigh, is honestly very inexact because that thing doesn't stay still on the scale. It doesn't like you. So I would wear these huge gardening gloves to weigh them. Because when you pick them up, what do? They bite you. Right? So it's like, what is happening? I'm getting peed on. Getting by rats. I don't know what the heck I'm doing in a lab. Like, I remember one summer, my first summer, I was literally just trying to, after my study was completed, we, harvest liver, kidney, blood, all these things to then analyze, right? And all I had to do was like do a vitamin D analysis of the blood. Like, how much vitamin D in their blood did they have? And I kid you not, I probably tried this experiment four or 5 times, never got to work. This is a $500 a pop experiment, right? So I'm just like, okay, what's going on here? And then one day, like my professor, we were in his office and he points to this huge tome of a book. And he's like, hey, you need to go study that for your, prelim exams to become an actual candidate, PhD candidate. And it was like a massive 500-page book all about like how a piece of equipment in the lab worked. And I'm like, okay, I'm out. So yeah, it was tough. I was really depressed at the time because I'm just like, I'm a year and a half into this PhD thing. We centered our lives around it. We moved. This is what I thought I was going to do. And now here I am. You think you're so stinking old in your mid-20s. Like, do I have to completely shift? So I did end up leaving. It was the right thing to do. Became a personal trainer in Des Moines, which was the exact right thing I needed to do at that time. Brandon, I don't know if you've caught Elite Edge, if you've seen the Elite Edge facilities around. They've got like one at Waukee is the OG. I worked at the Waukee location. That was like right by the Hy-Vee on Hickman.
Yep. I live right across the street.
No way. You should pop in. Joe's there. He hired me. It was good. It was a 6-month gig. It was perfect. I got to do a large group. Like, I was a boot camp instructor. So to me, that was almost like home because it was like leading a group of athletes. So I almost felt like I was very comfortable doing it. But then it gave me like one-on-one personal training, right? That I'd never done before. So it was all, and then working with Gen Pop too was really valuable. And, throughout that process, my brother texted me one day and said, hey, Northwestern College has an opening for a dual role strength coach, exercise science professor. You should apply. And I'm like, this kind of seems perfect. Like, this seems to be exactly like the blending of the things that I have done and what would fit my strengths and my knowledge. And I applied, got the offer and took it. And then, so we moved from Des Moines to Orange City in 2014. So so that took me there. I don't know how much we would dive into that, but I was there for 6 years, taught kinesiology, a little bit of everything. Main ones were nutrition, anatomical kinesiology, some health courses, taught motor learning. But then I also was the head strength coach for football, wrestling, cheer and dance, and the soccer teams. And then as Colin, you worked with, I think, all of you at some point, really. But like Jaden, I don't think you and I work together?
I came in that spring, but I was playing baseball. So
that's right. That's right. So you were on one of my teams, but not in season with that team.
Yeah.
And then left in 2020 and had a short stint with Brett Bartholomew and his company Art of Coaching for, again, it was like a 6-month time frame. That did not end up working out. It was a similar situation where it just was not a good fit to Iowa State. So I had to move on from that. And again, it was almost like, what am I going to do? This is crazy. So I don't know if you guys know this, but I worked at Staples for 4 months after AOC.
I think I did know that.
I did. I was printing T-shirts.
Nice.
That was easy.
Yes and no. Because it's all based on you get paid on your productivity.
Yeah.
And so like if you're printing for Nike, if you're printing for Nike, they do not want any imperfections. And so like, yeah, if you screw something up, you got to start over, and that costs money anyway. It was honestly the perfect thing. It was clock in, clock out. Nobody knew who I was.
Yeah.
Except for Stedman, who was Northwestern student. Stedman was working there too.
No way.
And he did it.
Funny.
So, but like, it was perfect. It was like literally show up at 6:15. No one cared if you clock in at 6:14 and 59 seconds. And at 3:30, you clock out, and you literally do not have to think about it or do anything until the next day. So it was the perfect thing to do. We just had our first daughter. I was mentally just so run down after leaving Northwestern, after AOC didn't work out. I needed the break, and that kind of allowed me the space to just recover. Yep. And when it was time to like start looking again, explore my options, and that forced me to think outside the box. One thing led to another. I found a job on Human Connect's website for an acquisitions editor. Had no idea what it was, but it sounded interesting. So I applied for it, and I got it, and I joined HK in April 2021, and I've been in publishing ever since. Almost a year ago, I left HK and have joined with another publishing company called Cognella, and I've been with them ever since. And I'm an acquisitions editor for exercise science and nutrition. And if we want to talk more about what that entails, we can. But I guess I'll leave it there, and we can let you guys take this where you want.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing all that. We've talked on a lot of episodes, whether with guests or us, just about like finding purpose and kind of, especially beyond your athletic career. And I think we all have a picture of what we want to do, what that's going to look like. And then God's got other plans for us. Like for me, I went through that. Like I thought I was called to be a college strength coach, and I was in that field for a while, and then I got to a point where I was like, I don't know if this is what I'm supposed to do. And
yeah,
like you said, that can be a dark place, like not knowing what, like I spent my whole 4-year college career doing this. I got a master's for this. And it's like, I don't think there's any wasted steps on the journey. And maybe you can say the same thing looking back, like even Staples, like you said, that was a good mental reset for you. So I think there's always a purpose for each step of the journey, and you can learn a lot from each step. But yeah, thanks for sharing all that. I'm kind of just curious with all that. A lot of your careers have been around exercise science, training, nutrition. Where did that interest, that love kind of come from? Did that come from, I mean, just working out, high school and college, or where did that love for training and kind of the science behind the human body come from?
The training side was kind of twofold, I guess. Growing up, I'm a kid of the 90s. So like at that time, like Rocky was still very popular. So like the first time I saw Rocky 4, I was like, I want to look like those guys. Like it was like, nope, I want to look like those guys. And then ironically, the movie Twins, you guys know that movie?
I don't.
Okay.
Twins.
So Twins is an old Arnold. It's an Arnold movie. Arnold Schwarzenegger is one of the main characters, and Danny DeVito, who are like the movie setup is like their long lost, I think, adopted twins, maybe, or I don't know, maybe they're actually crazy. Anyway, Arnold's in this movie. He like grew up on like a remote island, and then he comes to the big city, and he's like totally out of fish out of water, kind of like a Tarzan type thing, right? Well, anyway, there's this one scene in the movie where he has his hand up. He's in a car. He has hand on like the oh shit handle, and there's a girl in the backseat with him, and she like snuggles up next to him. He's like gets kind of excited. He flexes his bicep, and his shirt like rips. And I was just like, oh my god, like yeah, oh, right? So that's like the first thing where I knew I was like interested in like getting stronger, building muscle, things like that. But when I got to high school, then becomes athletic performance. And there was, when I, started in high school, there's literally one kid in our high school that lifted weights. He's actually my cousin. His name was Korey Van Wyk, and he could run a 48-400 for like a 2A high school. I'm like, hey, he lifts weights. He's really, really fast. Maybe I should do that too. Which is kind of flawed logic, but that's what I thought. So, I went to my track coach. Hey, I want to lift weights. luckily we had an alum who was at Baylor at the time. And this guy literally just gave me his winter lifting program, like 4-week program. And I kid you not, I did that over and over and over and over for my first 6 months of training. That's the only thing I did. The first lift I ever learned was split jerk.
Oh my God.
Exactly, right?
Oh my goodness
Yep.
gracious.
That was the first lift I ever learned. And
That's the first lift I quit when I stopped.
and like I don't think I bench pressed with a barbell until a full year into like my training life, which is crazy. And then like I remember back squatting and falling on my butt, and like this like classic story of like the college kid in the gym who's wearing the Olympic lifting shoes comes over and like gives you some pointers. So that's kind of where the training side happened. Nutrition was like through college. I studied abroad in Wales, and when you study abroad, you have a lot of time on your hands. Like it's great. And I just, there's this website, it's still up. It's not as popular anymore, but it was tnation.com, testosteronation.com. And at that time, like the level of writer they had was insane. Like John Berardi was writing consistently for them, Mike Roussel, Mike T. Nelson, Lonnie Lowry, these high level PhD trained, were literally like writing like mini research reviews for T Nation. And that's what I was reading. I could not wait to get up every single day and read the new nutrition article. And I realized I really like this stuff. I really like, learning about how your food impacts your body and performance. But as someone who was always looking for the edge, that's where I saw my edge. I'm like, well, no one else is doing this, so I'm going to do it. So yeah, that's where the nutrition love came. When I came back, I was like, all right, got to go the nutrition route, and the rest is kind of history from that perspective.
I'm curious, you talked about how you walked into that strength and conditioning at Central, and it was kind of like first time that strength and conditioning was just exclusive, that position, and then walked into that nutrition role. Do you think there's something, I know you went to like a seminar for Andy Galpin and Dan Garner. Do you think like, is blood work and lab testing the next step for strength and conditioning? Or do you think there's certain avenues that haven't been focused on that will be going forward, or what? I'm curious what your insight is.
Ooh. I mean, it's already done at the pro level.
Yeah,
for sure. Actually, so my mentor at Nebraska, Josh, he was at the Eagles for 6 years. So he was under Kelly and I forget who the guy who after him, Peterson. Under Kelly, they tracked everything. Mm-hmm. And he did he was doing biomarkers in 2015. Mm-hmm. But being Kelly and being Fort Knox, he like literally couldn't talk about it, share it, whatever. But he ended up presenting on it. So it's already done at the pro levels for sure. But interestingly, when he actually, just as a like an aside for like where this might go, when Peterson took over, he got rid of all that. He's like, we're scaling way back. Like, we're not taking blood. We're not going to run HRV every single day. We're just going to go bare bones minimum. And Josh was like, adherence was so much better. Mood was better. Yeah. Results that they were tracking are way better because you weren't asking the athletes to, number one, get pricked all the time.
Yeah.
And put all this stuff on their plate because they're still humans, right? Even though they're pro athletes and they get paid millions of dollars, they're still humans. They still have lives. They can only do so much. But so yes, in the pro ranks, it's definitely there. It's definitely going to grow. I don't know what will happen collegiately for like the legal reasons. Brandon, did you do any blood work or anything like that at Iowa, or like?
No.
Here's the thing: it has to be done by a dietitian or a sports med. It can't be straight to conditioning.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. It's got to be because since Josh is a dietitian, he could do that. But it's got to be underneath the umbrella of the medical team. It cannot be run by someone with their CSCS and a master's. You know what I mean? So now on the individual basis, it's absolutely going to be a thing, because I'm even thinking about in the future, if I have clients, like there are definitely things that I could have them do that have that service for them, but it's not like me recommending it to them. It's just like an additional service that they can get. And now that anyone can do it, even those of us who are isolated up here, like north of the wall in Northwest Iowa, like, I can do it. Like you can do mobile phlebotomist, you get a kit, get your finger pricked and send it out. So I don't know how much it'll bleed into like the collegiate side of things, just for legality reasons. But if it can, it will.
Yeah.
And it's already being done at the pro ranks for sure, and the Olympic ranks. But I will say there's not a whole lot of people who can do it super well. Dan being one of the best, obviously. But yeah, it's definitely going to become bigger. And like the whole sports science things, it's just not going to go away. Like it's just going to keep increasing. Like, so at that seminar, like Andy Galpin was talking about some of the things coming down the pipeline and like how our ability to continue to measure things in real time is only going to increase. So, are you guys familiar with continuous blood glucose monitors?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like that right now is commercially available to anybody who wants a CGM. So if you're diabetic, you no longer have to you don't have to prick anymore if you want to know what your blood glucose level is or how you respond to the carbohydrates that you eat. We're going to be able to have that for almost anything, even blood markers, other blood markers. And it's going to get crazy. So like, as someone who now is in the education field of like, I determine what education gets out there, this is kind of where I need to live on the bleeding edge, so to speak. But it almost, for my role in specifically, is like, how do I make sure things get out there that help current and former professionals build their filter? And like knowing what's needed, what matters, what's kind of BS, what's, not worth paying attention to. That's all really important too. So.
Yeah. And for like nutrition and just health in general, there's a lot of science, and that science is continuously growing, but there's an art side to it as well, as far as like the psychology of change. And I know like with like people with Whoop scores, they'll see their stress scores and maybe not feel stressed, but seeing that score makes them more stressed. So maybe can you speak to, as we have more numbers available, if that can be a negative thing, or even just the psychology side of making nutritional changes or health changes?
Yeah, it absolutely can be a negative, because I mean that's where sleep tracking probably gets the most attention, because if someone struggles with sleep, they start tracking their sleep. They have an app or something telling them they suck at sleep. Then they get frustrated and more, stressed about it, and then they don't sleep. So like it all depends on like your personality and like how you're going to take those things. And like that's super important, is also working with a coach, because even something like HRV, heart rate variability, is like, so you can change it in the moment. If you get an HRV reading that says like you have low readiness, you do breathing techniques and change that in the moment.
Well,
so like
even to my time at Iowa, we did that every morning, the HRV or whatever. And it was almost one of those things where you would try to do everything and you would think that you would have a good score in the morning, and then you wouldn't. And then you would go to the facility thinking that the coaches saw that you didn't have a good score. And then what are they thinking about what I'm doing or what, to recover, or how I handled my day yesterday, when actually I genuinely try to do my best. And now I make a mistake, and now are they going to double up on it because of how I recovered, when really it's like, was that score actually depicting how I recovered the day before? Those are some of the things that you guys are maybe referencing. That's maybe a specific example of how it affected me, but like, I know I wasn't the only one. So
and that's where it gets into the crucial importance of never putting too much stock in one data point. You need to look at trends, right? You need to look at things for a long time, for usually like months on end, to get a true sense for how someone responds to training, what their baseline actually is. Like that's another thing that Galpin talks about, is like some people's baseline HRV is completely different than another person's. So you really just cannot take things at face value day to day. You have to look at the trend, and not everyone just adapts at the same rates. Certain stressors might impact you different than others. So this gets in like stress resilience. So if somebody is not stress resilient, their HRV might be impacted by merely, to some people, minor things, whether that's studies, whether that's relationship stuff, whereas a stress resilient person may not be affected by that. You know what I mean? So like you just can't look at things in isolation and take one data point and make a decision off of that most times. Now, when it comes to the behavior side of things, this is where I can't get too mad at the Nebraska athletes back in the day, because like you just realize that there's so much that goes into what someone chooses to do, how they choose to behave. And unfortunately, nutrition is one of the hardest things because, number one, it has to do with so much has to do with your background, your upbringing, your beliefs about food, your preferences, because nutrition is so tied to, sounds weird, but pleasure, right? So like if you are someone who, like I'll never forget when one of my first clients that I worked with as a personal trainer, he was Muslim. He wasn't from America. I don't remember what country he was from, but their cultural way of eating is very different than America. And, you know, the way they approach food, the way they view food, the way it is a centerpiece of their family is completely different than us, you know? So there are some things obviously that they would eat on a daily basis that from a body composition, he was diabetic, he had multiple metabolic issues. But one of the things his wife loved to make for him was like this fried bread. That was a cultural thing. If here I am, I would like a 23-year-old kid telling this guy to not eat that would have been a recipe for disaster. So I'm thinking about so you focus on something else. What can you impact? Now, when it goes back to the Nebraska athletes, maybe they didn't understand the importance of nutrition. You don't know. Did they have a belief about a protein shake? Did they not believe it, that it would help them? Did they have a bad experience in the past? All these things factor into if someone will follow. And I'll never forget, so one of the teams I worked directly with was basketball, which was kind of funny, but at the time was pretty unique because it was kind of a joke, but at the same time, that's a really big win. So it was kind of fun to be a part of. Actually, one of the cooler moments of my time there was shaking Tom Osborne's hand after they beat Texas. At the time, Texas was number 2. And it was crazy, even for Nebraska ball. It was a great environment. But one of their star players, or their better players, after a lift, I mentioned something to him about, hey, make sure you grab a recovery shake on your way out. He looked straight at me and goes, "Man, I don't need that shit." And I was like, okay. So so many things factor into whether someone will do it. And if I could give any advice to any coach listening, any future coach, is just roll with the punches as much as possible. There's so much that is out of your control. And, on a team level, if you look macro, sure, there are things that you have to try to institute. Like Brandon, I'll never forget, one of the days I visited, when I was at Northwestern, I visited Iowa football. The pre-lift talk was Coach Doyle, talking about how you guys weren't eating enough calories or consuming enough calories because he didn't have to order as many protein shakes as he normally did.
Uh-huh.
So that's a team cultural wide thing. On the individual basis, if someone has not been following the program set out for them, you have to drill down a little bit. It's not just because they're lazy or they're defiant. Most times, maybe they are, but you still have to figure out why,
I'm curious from your time at Northwestern, from obviously right when you got there and kind of I guess mostly speaking about football, because that's kind of our world a little bit, kind of the cultural differences from the beginning and how you kind of inherited the program versus how that kind of changed over time. Curious if you have any unique takeaways about that specific population and, I don't know, the trajectory they went on, positive, negative, or struggles that you saw?
I mean, honestly, all the stuff I just talked about factors into it a huge, massively, just in a different way. Because, all right, so you guys. So for anyone listening, I came to Northwestern. I was the second hired full-time strength coach. They had a guy for 2 full years prior to me. He's still there. Amazing, amazing human. Like one of my best friends. You literally will not find a better human on earth. But personality-wise, especially coaching, we're like polar opposites. So, that's like one layer of me taking over his teams that factored into like my experience when I started. I also came from a very blue-collar program that had a Doyle-esque leader. So again, he's a huge mentor of mine, and we're friends to this day. He's actually the reason I'm an adjunct professor for River Falls. Like, amazing relationship, but he was very hard on you. Like, he stressed me out a lot, honestly, sometimes. I guess if he's listening to that, if he ever listens to this might be new to him. Because, like, he would kind of, you know, you're his athlete, then you're his student. And, like, those would be separated sometimes. But, yeah, like, he would get on people, like, every day. And some could take it, some couldn't. But and so the way that was run was how I came into Northwestern, thinking like, this is what I'm going to create. This is what I'm going to build. Right. So on multiple levels, people were not ready for that. I wasn't really ready for it. The athletes weren't ready for it. The culture wasn't ready for it. School wasn't ready for it. It wasn't set up that way. It was kind of a train wreck, to be honest with you. And I am specifically speaking out football and in that aspect. I don't remember the growing pains as much with other programs, but like, it was like one of the hardest years of my life. And that's after the whole PhD thing that I mentioned earlier. So like, I mean, for the first few weeks, I had altercations with athletes in the weight room, altercations verbally, nothing physical, but like athletes talking back to me, yelling at me, telling me they weren't going to do things, not following things I tried to implement from a attendance standpoint because attendance was awful. I had coaches not supporting me in telling athletes they didn't have to do the things I was trying to like institute, even though we had agreed upon doing those things. It was rough. It was rough. But like, it's really nobody's fault. You know what I mean? Like, taking over for Ox, because he's much more laid. He's very laid back. He's not really a rah-rah guy. He's not a hard ass. And I'm not either. Let's be honest. I'm not either. But like, I still had these standards I wanted to implement and things I wanted to create. And just to be honest, like, I did not walk into a blue collar culture. I didn't. And I was so shocked. Like, I'm thinking like, this is literally the sister school of where I went. It's a Dutch, you know, a lot of the same people, Dutch community. And man, like the first time I got after someone for doing like a drill wrong or like not listening or like talking, they're just like, what are you doing? Like, why are you talking to me this way? Like, how dare you? How dare you? There's just a lot of butting heads, a lot of like people, athletes. And I'm saying, and this is honestly like, I should also say some of it was also my fault because I did not understand or think about the things like, you know, I guess part of my frustration was like, I tried to, because I came in like trying to think about like, okay, like I thought in my mind I was not changing things a ton, but I actually was. I just didn't realize it. And, you know, diving right into that, plus teaching on top of that, which was my quote unquote main job. Yeah, it was a rough first couple of years, but over time, you know, there was coaching change, and that was obviously very, very good. And, you know, it takes just a few years to athletes get to know you. I did let my personality start to shine through a little bit more. Now, from a cultural program perspective of like standard wise, you could argue maybe that's good or bad, but like, did it improve my relationships with the athletes? Absolutely. Absolutely. I kid you not, but I still stressed about it constantly. Like, am I going to be good enough when I wake up the next morning to be their leader? Am I going to be good enough? Am I going to be good enough? Am I, constantly. And I will say some of that was trying to live up to what I had. And, yeah, I don't know if you want me to dive into anything more there, but it was just definitely better when I left. But I will say it never got to the level I wanted it to be, as far as like what I envisioned, what I wanted, how I felt it should be. How much impact could I have really had? I don't know. Because when you are at a small school and you're the only person, that's usually the only voice, that's usually the only guy running anything, how much can you do? I don't know, but you also only have so much bandwidth. And it's so draining to be the only voice that, like, there are definitely times where you're just like, whatever, man, like, I'm just going to let XYZ slide, or I'm not going to fight that battle today. And if you are able to focus on like a one team, or if you are like at an Iowa or a Nebraska or any D1 major school, and you have 4 or 5 assistant full-time coaches plus interns, at least you have a unified voice, right? Hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
And at a place like Northwestern, you don't have that because you're the only person. So, as much as obviously that was a good thing at the time when I took that job, it seemed good, but like over time, I just learned, like, yeah, probably Colin, similar to you, it wasn't sustainable. Not even talking about financially and life wise and all that kind of stuff. So,
well, if it's any consolation to you, at least my class and my friends, we thoroughly enjoyed having you as our coach, and we felt you were vastly overqualified to be at our level, but it was
I would agree with that.
Well, it was cool.
Cool.
Even from my freshman to senior year, I felt like there was even a huge culture change at that time, because we got there as a freshman, and it was almost like not cool to try hard, or like at halftime we'd be getting our butts kicked and guys would be talking about like cool plays they made. I'm like, this is so weird. Like this isn't comfortable. Yeah. And we were 4-6 that first year, but by the time, we left, we were playoff teams every year. And then, eventually when Jaden's grade got around, it was, a national championship team. And I think you played a huge piece in that culture change, as well as McCarty coming in and just the guys that we had there. So
yeah,
I know it probably felt hard during that time, especially the years I wasn't there. Like, I know you had some other stories you said from those times, but it's definitely gotten to a better place, especially for the NAI level, and now they're competing every year, and I think you played a huge part in that. So shout out to you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah. I'm curious, in your own training, your own approach to training, how that's changed over time since you've been done. I know when I visited Northwestern as a junior, your biceps were larger than my head. So I don't know if you were in a bodybuilding phase at that time, but I walked in the old weight room, this guy's just yoked. But
What was it? Guns to Glory or whatever?
Oh my god! Oh, legendary.
That made its way to West Line, and I died every time I did it.
It's so funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
I definitely didn't feel that way. That's for sure. And what's funny is, like, I was smaller. Like, I definitely was smaller at that time than when I was in grad school. And what's so like, it's just funny, like how that works, where like you have a view of yourself, and then you're up how someone else viewed you. But so, like, the first time I ever met my best friend Sean Casey, I was at Iowa State. I was in the middle of like I would say probably the closest I ever came to bodybuilding. It was bodybuilding training, but I never competed. And I find out like a couple years later, he said when he first saw me, he said I was so big, there's probably nothing, I could never do anything athletic if I tried. He's like, dude, your forearms were so big, like how could you even like walk? So, but then like after that, I became a personal trainer, and so I was significantly like smaller, and I'm thinking like, man, I never was a pound over 195. even at my biggest. So anyway, funny,
It's
but
crazy.
so yeah, I mean, after ending my athletic career, um, let's see, I had a very small CrossFit stint that didn't last very long because it sucked my soul. But um, I thought I was gonna get into strongman. I kind of did get into strongman because I saw that as like, okay, how do I get like the best of everything and not get out of shape but still be strong, big, athletic, that kind of thing. I did do a strongman competition. It was very, very humbling, but I did not have access to equipment over years, so it just kind of died off. Never really fell in love with powerlifting. Most of my classmates got into powerlifting, and I'm just like, I don't really want to get out of breath walking up the stairs. Like I don't know. Never really interested me in bodybuilding. Same thing. The idea of like tanning myself up, shaving everything, putting on like a little bikini and flexing in front of a bunch of other men, or like, not going to do that either. So yeah, I just, but I trained like a powerlifter, bodybuilder hybrid, probably was the closest thing that you could say. Christian Thibodeau was a huge, I did his training a ton in grad school, especially in Nebraska. Loved it, still love it to this day. And then Iowa State, I largely did John Meadows training programs. Do you guys know who John Meadows was? He's now passed away. The Mountain Dog. But he's still, weirdly enough, his YouTube account still releases videos, which is kind of weird because he passed away a couple of years ago. Look him up. He's very jacked, and his programs were the hardest programs I've ever done. But that's what led to me being so big. Apparently, I couldn't do anything athletic if I tried. Yeah. So then when I got Northwestern, when I got to Northwestern, it was literally just like get in whenever you can. More honestly, it was just very basic, full body training every day, push pull. Yeah. And then when I left Northwestern, I did absolutely nothing for like 6 months after my daughter was born. And it got to the point where I was like, I had to do something. I have to do something, or else this is going to get out of hand. And that's when I bit the bullet and joined the CrossFit gym here in town, and have been doing that ever since. Although I would not say I do CrossFit or that I'm a CrossFitter, but it is 50 to 75% of this style of training I do now is CrossFit.
I'd love to hear you gave a speech or a talk. I think it was at the Northwestern clinic, but it was about supplements, and not only like what supplements to use, but what to look for when picking out supplements. So
Yeah,
maybe for like general population, former athletes, maybe what are some supplements you recommend, and then also what to look for when actually selecting a specific brand.
yeah, that's a good question. So I would say generally across the board. So when you think about supplements, you kind of have to think of it in two different categories. I like to split it up. So you have categories that meet nutrient needs. That's like one category. Just meet your nutrient needs. And that's like, when people talk about supplements are supplements, they fill the gaps. They are not your diet. That's what these fall into. So I would say, unless you are on a coast and you eat fish twice a week, fatty fish, you probably should be supplementing with omega-3s, because otherwise, unless you eat a ton of chia seeds and flax seeds, which you really can't, because if you did that, you'd be pooping your brains out all the time. And it's an inferior source of omega-3 as opposed to DHA and EPA. You probably should be on an omega-3 supplement. And just a multivitamin would probably be the other one that across the board, I would feel pretty comfortable recommending for anyone for just general health performance, whether you're an athlete or not. Those would be probably the two. Because like even a vitamin D, I would be a little cautious on. Like for our purposes, being in the Midwest and honestly for most of the year getting almost zero sunlight exposure, you could probably be pretty safe on vitamin D. But like otherwise, I would want to know a vitamin D blood level before like blanket recommending that. So that's why I wouldn't recommend it wholesale. Magnesium is often suggested too, which is probably fine. That's another one where it's like, okay, what's in your multi? If you're taking a multi, And then are you getting any foods that are high in magnesium? Most of us do not, because Americans are awful at eating green leafy vegetables, and we don't really eat pumpkin seeds. So magnesium would also be a fairly safe bet, but I wouldn't say a blanket for everybody. Now, athletes, I mean, creatine would probably be the one. And I mean, I would honestly, I consider creatine a health supplement anymore. I don't consider it performance only supplement, because we know that creatine honestly just makes most of your bodily systems function better, because it's an energy source that's readily available that we can use anaerobically. So brain, heart, obviously muscle. So that would be another one I would say could honestly be most athletes, if you would benefit from creatine supplementation. Honestly, outside of that, there's not much as far as like, I mean, there's a lot you can recommend situationally, but as far as like what most people could take, should take, that would benefit them, that's honestly like the base list I would give. Do you want to go into that anymore? Any questions on that? Or like, we could go into the supplement thing?
With magnesium, do you have preference over like 3-8, glycinate, citrate?
It's not oxide.
Yeah.
Honestly, just not oxide. Like those, so like glycinate, 3-8, malates, all these other forms that magnesium is bonded to, they might have minor effects. Citrate would be another one. So like sometimes they get tied to like an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Is 3-8 the one that crosses the blood-brain barrier? I think that's the one that, like, if you want like cognitive effects, take that one. If you want energy support, take the citrate. If you want sleep support, take the glycinate, that kind of thing. But just don't do oxide, magnesium oxide, because it's so not bioavailable that whatever you get on the label, you're probably not absorbing the vast majority of it. So just, I would say, don't do oxide.
Are there any things you look for in like a multivitamin that you would prefer one over the other when looking?
Oh man, that's a good question, because it's a lot to ask people to become familiar with forms of things, just like we just talked about. Most people, because it's easy to say like, oh, just look at the RDA, the daily value percentage. Those vary widely, and almost all of them are going to be pretty dang potent for the water soluble vitamins. Fat soluble vitamins and minerals are kind of all over the place. I will say what I typically do when evaluating a multi is the first thing I look at is vitamin D. If their vitamin D is like meaningless, meaning like the dosage is meaningless to actually impact, it's probably not a very potent vitamin, a multivitamin. So I typically like to see at least like 1,000 IUs of vitamin D per serving on a multi. And then I feel pretty confident the rest of it's properly dosed. But I would say for those of us in the field, just make sure that the vitamins and mineral forms are the active forms, or the forms that some form of the one that will get used in the body. So like for vitamin D, that'd be cholecalciferol. For vitamin B12, that'd be cobalamin. But like B5 is pyridoxal phosphate. So like that's a lot to ask the general person to look at. The other thing would just be just some semblance of third-party testing. That's really the best you can do. And that would be like informed choice, NSF testing. If you see like USP is another one that's on a lot of vitamins in particular, because they do like single ingredient testing, whereas the other two are just the whole thing. Because they will do potency testing to make sure that it's close to meeting label claims. But here's what I would not look for in a multi. Don't look for it to have all the extra crap, because so many multis have their vitamin and their mineral blend, and they'll have these like little extra things like antioxidant blend, digestive enzyme blend, sexual virility support. And I have never seen a blend like that be any more than just a little sprinkling of stuff that will have zero impact. So if it has like a lot of extra blends, proprietary blends, matrices, I would pass on it and just make sure that it's the core vitamins and minerals only.
How about as far as like prebiotic, probiotic, symbiotic, any of those?
Oh man, that is a fantastic question, because that one I used to have as like maintenance, like have it all the time as like a maintenance thing. But through the talking with professionals in that industry, that tends to not be what they recommend. They want it to be only if you need it.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're still don't know, we're still honestly trying to tease out what the minimum threshold is for actually impacting your microbiome. Because if you look at a probiotic supplement, it'll typically have the dosage will be in what's called colony forming units, or CFUs. And no matter which one you pick up, it looks like a ton, like so many million or so many billion CFUs. We were dropping that into an environment that has trillions of bacteria. So even if that thing has millions of CFUs, that's a drop in the ocean. And so that's where like strains matter, targeted strains, like what is the ecosystem of your microbiome, like what strains are prevalent, which strains are not, are any of them pathogenic? And this is actually kind of timely, because I just had a consult literally earlier this week on a stool test that I did,
Nice.
which was pretty interesting, because I could see what strains in my gut were low, which ones. So if you're unfamiliar, some of our microbiome or gut bacteria in our gut can synthesize their own vitamins from things that go through your digestive system. They can make short chain fatty acids that then get absorbed into the bloodstream that have various effects. And like I could see which B5 producing bacteria were low, or B12 producing bacteria were low in my gut. I could see which ones were linked to immunity. So that would give you the most targeted way to supplement with probiotics. And I'll fully say I am not up to speed on like which ones those are yet, because we're still learning so stinking much about it. But don't be surprised if you did like take a probiotic and didn't really notice much of anything. So that's really the best answer I can give right now. I will say, if you can, when you're looking at a probiotic supplement, try to make sure that it says something about being spore-based. That's probably the biggest piece of advice I've gotten over like the past year or so. It actually came from my podcast. So if you go to Lacey Hall's episode, she was my probiotic expert that I had on. And if it's not a spore-based probiotic, that means it likely will be killed in your stomach because of the hydrochloric acid. So spore-based means it ensures that it gets through your stomach and small intestine and actually reaches large intestine, where your microbiome largely lives. So,
Well, we'll wrap it up here. We'll just before we go, appreciate you hopping on. Do you want to plug anything that you're currently doing, where people can find you? I know you just mentioned your podcast. Anything you want to plug before we go?
I mean, yeah, the podcast, I've got 50 episodes up covering everything related to human performance. So it's the Performance Connection podcast. Look that up. I'm on all the socials. I'm most active on LinkedIn, honestly. I'm on Instagram. It'd be like the second one. So I guess we really didn't talk a whole lot about like my day job now. So just like as a quick overview, so I'm an acquisitions editor, and what that means is I drive what my company offers for books. Like that, I am the starting point. So in a couple of years here, you'll start to see Cognella's website start to fill up with nutrition and exercise science texts. If you go to Human Kinetics website and go to the strength training and category, almost all of the like recent first books on the first page are mine. So you got like High Powered Plyometrics by Radcliffe, Dean Somerset and Dan Pope have like a injury resiliency one coming out, landmine training, like this Thibodeau book is mine. That all starts with me. So I have an idea, I pitch it to the company, they say, yes, run with it. And then I go recruit an author to write that book, and then I edit the book for content. So my job on day to day is going out there and finding what books are needed, who needs to write them, or like the other way, who is a stud and needs to write a book regardless of the topic. And so I'll say as a plug, just like if you are a professional listening to this and you have an idea of like, oh man, this would be a great book. Like I wish I would have had this when I was in college, or I wish I had this now. Like I am the person you reach out to get that started. So like right now, like I kid you not, yesterday I contracted, it'll be the first textbook other than the TSAC to address tactical strength and conditioning. It'll be, and like that to me is so freaking cool. So
That is
basically Tarleton State, Texas A&M, OSU, Oklahoma State, they're going to do a multi-site collab on tactical, ranging from military to fire, police, EMS, and it's going to be stinking awesome. But I've got everything from that to women's health to nutrition coaching. It's pretty awesome to be a part of, to be honest with you. So if people have ideas in general, reach out to me to just say, hey, I think this would be great. Everything under the sun, nutrition, exercise, science related is my purview. But yeah, look me up on LinkedIn. And I speak, I write. So if you have a clinic, you want to run a clinic, you want a speaker. Actually, next year, I'll be speaking on pre-workout ingredients, which is going to be a fun thing for me. So I'm always open to those opportunities.
sick. Truly a jack of all trades. Coach,
Oh, man.
appreciate you hopping on with us. This has been awesome.
Bet.
But
Yes, well, thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it so much. It's fun.
yeah, for sure. We'll have to get together sometime and rip Guns and Glory 1 or 2.
Yes. So we all
Or
can't
is there a
move our
third
arm,
level?
like we have to like sprain our arm like this for the next 2 weeks.
Yes, that's the goal. All right. Thanks,
Okay.
Coach.
You bet. Thanks,
Nothing
guys.
else.
Thank you.
Until next time.
See you guys.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave a rating, review, or tell a friend to check us out. Be sure to follow us at SHRP_training for more content to help you be your best self. Go be great today.